I want to tell a short story before I get into the sermon. Today's service is about the peace of wild things. And Brother Zachary just introduced us to one rabbit story. We were talking earlier this week about conejos, the Spanish word for rabbits. And the rabbit or the conejo has been dear to my husband and I. I didn't grow up with bunnies where I grew up in Central Jersey. And when I had a house out in Long Island, and now where we live in New Jersey, again, we have families of rabbits that live in our yard, and they just bring me so much joy. This one story of a rabbit, it's a little similar to Brer Rabbit, but in a different way. And there are different versions of this, but it's most known from North American indigenous stories. The rabbit is out in the woods, running and eating and playing and enjoying their best life. And then they see a hawk flying overhead, wide circles. And the rabbit says, "Oh no, there's a hawk. It's going to eat me." Well, the hawk doesn't see the rabbit. And the rabbit continues, and the hawk continues flying along its merry way. And the rabbit, getting more overwhelmed with anxiety, yells out, "Oh no, there's that hawk. It's going to eat me." Well, the hawk still didn't hear the rabbit or see the rabbit, and it's just looking for food. And you can guess where this is going. The third time, the rabbit, terrified of the hawk, screams, "Oh no, there's a hawk in the sky." And the hawk heard the rabbit and had a tasty lunch. I think about that story. It's meant to teach us that sometimes we bring things into our lives. We cause the harm for ourselves over our worry and our anxiety. But I also think about it as a reminder that the peace of wild things is not necessarily peaceful. And I want to begin with a short reading from another animal that most of us know as a terrorist, the wild goose. Have we ever met a wild goose walking our dog? And right, it's the only animal my dog has learned, leave alone. All the rest she goes after, but my 70-pound dog has been taught the peace of wild geese. And I want to begin with the ending line of a poem called Wild Geese by Wendell Berry. "Abandon as in love or sleep, holds them to their way clear in the ancient faith. What we need is here. And we pray not for new earth or heaven, but to be quiet in our heart and an eye clear. What we need is here." This culminating line to the poem by Wendell Berry is the quintessential description of spirituality. Poetry is possibly the best medium for the definition to such an elusive word, spirituality. It is a word that's been encountered. It's better encountered than defined. It's a word that we can know what it is without knowing what it means. And poetry sometimes helps us to know what it means, even if we can't readily articulate it in words. The peace of wild things is one of those phrases that evokes a range of reactions in people. Some of us may quite sure we'd be here today because that phrase is the bedrock of how we do church, so to speak, even more than Sunday morning worship, nature, wild things. And others maybe have an allergic reaction, so to speak, to the sense of the spirit. The natural world is anything but peaceful, so why do we pretend like it is? Both sides speak to me in the love of the natural world and what emanates from the transcendent, made immanent, as well as the frantic New Yorker hyped up on antihistamines, fearful of the welts mosquitoes leave. I told this story recently in worship, and who subsequently loves spiritual winter hiking. The swatting of my hands to stave off the bugs in the summertime makes warm weather hiking with me anything but peaceful. Just ask my husband if you don't believe me. I remember one trip that brought out both extremes for me. It was the morning of my 31st birthday. I had spent the summer working on my Spanish in Guatemala, mostly through a language school in the city of Antigua. But I was ending my trip by traveling across the country and closing it out by hiking through the jungles of Tikal. There were enclosures at various spots, so don't think I was camping out on the ground. That would have been suicidal, really. There were enough threats for anyone in the daytime waking hours to not risk sleeping out night in the peace of nature. When I got to Tikal, it was probably about, see if you can imagine this, about 85 degrees, and the humidity was something like 120%, much like this room right now. So we're in the spirit. It didn't stop me, though, in the slightest, from dressing up for the occasion in the fashion that suited a person who is allergic to every single thing possible out there, and who, upon being bitten by a mosquito, will have welts the size of quarters. I put on jeans and boots, t-shirt, covered by a long sleeve shirt, covered by a hoodie, which of course was up the whole time I was in the jungle. Guatemala also thankfully has, and this is important to know, more lax laws around the percentage of DEET allowed in a bug spray. It's much higher than it is here, and I loved it. The peace of wild things is all good, as long as they aren't crawling on me. I recall seeing all sorts of insects I've never seen before or since, from giant ants, like the size of a thumb with tiger striping on it, to the lovingly placed spider webs at head height with spiders the size of my fist crawling in them. I only walked into 3 or 4 of those during those nests during that walk. Probably the most disturbing was a moment with my small group where I was a few feet ahead and the air in front of me started to waver like those old black and white TV static. Remember that? When you lose your channel? And I'm like, what am I looking at? I don't know what I'm seeing. It took on it was just fuzzy. It was maybe 5 feet in front of me. I asked the local tour guide what I was looking at. And I couldn't honestly interpret what I was seeing. It was so absolutely new. He casually said, "Oh, those are army ants on the march. You probably want to take a step back right now." Much more calm than I was, and I took a bunch of steps back. Maybe this is it's the Unitarian Universalist in me and our fervent anti-creedalism. But any theology centering the peace of wild things needs to also make room for army ants 5 feet in front of you in life. It's nice to say if you don't bother them, they won't bother you, but that's not vaguely true. You just need to get out of the way. Sometimes you're just very lucky. Spirituality that pretends we have more control than we do may be comforting, but it's not deeply rooted. You probably haven't been so close to actual army ants on the march. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy for all of you. But most of us have faced far worse in our personal lives up close. Brother Zachary in our prayer just reminded of us how often we're in the minority in the world with the security we have, or relative security we have in our lives here. Or maybe you're facing a travail right now that's heartbreaking or devastating or exhausting. And maybe the lesson sometimes in that is you just need to take a step back. We're not always going to overcome everything in front of us. We're not always, or even usually, in control of the big things in life. That quote that I started with, abandon as in love or sleep, holds them to their way. The peace of wild things is about abandon and faith. It's the very opposite of control. What is essential is all around us, but we don't achieve it by our strivings. We come to it with abandon as in love or sleep. On that fateful morning of my 31st birthday, in what in hindsight appears to have been an attempt to activate every one of my primal fears and terrors right before sunrise, we climbed up on the step pyramids in Tikal. It would be later in the day, and when I found myself clinging 50 feet up to a ladder that was needed to access a tier where the steps had eroded, I was paralyzed for a solid 5 minutes. I have a fear of heights. I remember saying, "You can do this. When are you going to be here again?" It's an experience. And that was where another guide would casually comment later, "Oh yes, we added that a few years ago after some German tourists fell to their death right there." But I didn't know that fact yet. Hanging from that ladder was the very moment in my life when I learned that there's a deep truth that you don't always have to prove you can do something. In the first pyramid we climbed, though, much of the hillside had been left intact from a dig, and you could gradually climb to the top like you would any other hiking trip in the hill country. Scary for some of us, but still doable. In my undergraduate years, in addition to religion, I studied anthropology and archaeology and happened to focus on ancient Mesoamerica. So this was a big dream come true to see these wonders in person. I was not going to miss the chance to see the world from that ancient angle, not because of a hill. So I was sitting up top as the sun was rising about 50 feet above the tree line of the jungle. You could look out and see for miles, with other step pyramids peeking out from the tree line, when with what seemed to be spontaneous generation, dragonflies began appearing all around. They were waking up to feed in the early morning light, but I could not see where they were coming from. Just more and more were in front in the blink of an eye, easily 30 or 40 of them, whipping about within 15 feet of where I was sitting. It was one of the most magical moments of my life. And we pray not for new earth or heaven, but to be quiet in heart and eye clear. I did not know where they came from or notice where they went, but for their time, they were all that I could see. May we attend carefully to the moments that come swiftly, unbidden in new and unexpected ways. Those new moments to our clear eye and our quieted heart are the ancient faith found in abandon. Abandon of our worries, abandon of our thoughts, our accomplishments, and our fears. Letting go to let a little more of life in, much like as in love or in sleep.